Good afternoon guys, I'm Chris and welcome back to this Wednesday's episode of Rift Amps. You join me at a pivotal point in any amp build, which is the point where the board is going to be installed into the chassis. And when I'm building my amps, I've always done as much chassis wiring as possible, so the board doesn't get installed until much later on in the build process. So I spend a lot of time doing my chassis work, doing lots of connections and installing various bits and pieces, getting wire runs done, checking things out, getting them exactly where I want them to be. Because once you drop your board in and you start wiring, it's then very difficult to do other jobs down the line. So it's always probably one of the last 5 things in an amp build in terms of chapter and verse stuff. You know what I mean, that I like to do. I've seen other amp builders get the board in installed quite early on, and then you always see them struggling with various bits and pieces. So but anyway, that's where we are with this. This is an Ainsley Lister signature build. I'm always building these, so we're getting there now. Fortunately, my fingerprints get absolutely everywhere, so you never can fully clean them off. Well, you can, but it takes forever, and there's not a real benefit other than your own OCD. So just a bit of IPA and some kitchen roll. Just keep working your way through. Get the worst of it off, and that'll be fine. Okay, so my board as well, I've got it's fully populated, and I've done my flying leads and all my connections and things like that. So that is now ready to go in, and just make sure got all my wires in the right place and nothing's going to get twisted or caught. My screen stopper's out of the way slightly. Make sure I'm happy with anything that's going to be hidden underneath. And in with the board we go. Happy with that? I am. And if you're building your own amp, now is a good time. So you could install your board like this, get your fixings in place, and then you can take your multimeter and any underboard connections that you've got going on, just take some time with your multimeter on the continuity setting and just buzz them out and make sure that any connections that, or any points that need to be connected are in fact connected, and you get continuity where you want it. But crucially, and this is the mistake a lot of people make when building amps, is, for example, you've got a wire run underneath the board that goes from, let's say, here to over here, and you've accidentally connected it to the wrong eyelet. So check, if you know where it's meant to be going, check the ones in the vicinity, just in case you've made a mistake with your connections. Because that can and will cause all sorts of fun problems. Snug that down. Check this one again. We're in. Big moment. Right, it's looking good. Now, I've changed my process over the years in terms of how I wire the board up. I always used to start on the bottom right hand corner, and I always build in this orientation. So from the back of the amp forwards, I'd always start here and I'd work clockwise around the board. Start here along the bottom edge, do all of these, and then come along the front. To me, that always made most sense. But what I've actually found over the years is I like to do all of my front panel wiring at this point. So the first ones I'm going to do is all of these wires go up to my pots and any ones that I need to add from the board, etc, etc. Do those first, because once you get these out of the way, these floppy wires here, it's easier to be neat. Then what I can do is then work along this way. So that's what I'm going to do now, or that's going to be the next job on this particular build. Right, Q&A time then. So welcome back everybody. Hope you all had a lovely weekend. Am I in a good place? I am in a good place. Yeah, so how are we all getting on? Hope you all enjoyed the video on Sunday and of course last week's Q&A as well. Hope you found all of that interesting. But we've got quite a few bits to talk about. So let's get cracking. We'll start with David Lovell Bass, regular commenter on the channel. Welcome back, David. He said, excited to hear the outcome of the 100-watt black panel Bassman. Were the differences between the black and silver panel Bassman models just an addition of a mids control, phase inverter values, and then later being ultra linear? No, there were some revoicing changes as we went down the line. So if we start with the, I suppose we need to do the history of the, I mean, how far back do you want to go with Bassmans, really, I guess. But if we start with the black panel Bassman, the AA864, that then became the AB165. So that's the 250-watt black panel Bassman. Off the top of my head, and I know I should know this, so don't shout at me in the comments, there may be one after that as well. Is that someone coming in? No, it's not. So that's still those were 50 watters. Then they went to the drip edge silver panel amps, and the early ones of those were AB165s. I know somewhere written down I'll have all these changes on file, so I'm sure there are some slight revisions over the years. Then you get the non-drip edge silver panel amps. So that, and then they changed it and they called it the Bassman 50, didn't they? Then there was the Bassman 70. Then they finally introduced the first 100-watt Bassman, the Bassman 100. Again, a silver panel amp. And then later on, there is the 135, the one that I've got out the front. So there's lots of different variations. And throughout the years, they were changing and refining the circuit and trying to get them to do different things. So if you go back and look at the black panel amps, particularly the bass circuit, it's got an extra gain stage or two, hasn't it, compared to the later silver panel amps. So what I've decided to do with mine is I'm doing an AB165 bass channel, but rather than using the fixed mid resistor, I'm adding a mid pot to it. And then on the guitar channel, again, I think I'm doing a A864. Yeah. But again, adding a mid control to that as well. I'll keep the bright switch on the guitar channel and the deep switch on the bass channel. So that's my plan for it, but I'm not doing it as ultra linear. I'm just doing it as a straight 100-watt output stage. I'm not sure if I've shown you in this video yet, doing the board positioning and layout and stuff like that. So on there, I've actually got the AA864 bass preamp on that board, but I am changing it to the AB165. So if that's confused anybody, please don't be confused. This is what prototyping and design is all about. You're constantly working out and changing stuff. So, but no, to answer your question, David, there are quite a few changes because they're trying to achieve different things with the amps, and you know, the changing taste of players' taste over the years, and the different markets they were chasing and all that kind of stuff. So there are some really interesting ones. But all I'm trying to do is take the standard black panel Bassman. In fact, I'm doing a hybrid, aren't I, between the AA864 and the AB165. bolting on a 100-watt output stage and then making the tonal changes required to optimize it for that, because you will have to make some changes. So basement amps are fascinating. I did have a plan once to collect all of them. I wanted every single Bassman model. Oh, I actually forgot the Bassman 10 as well, didn't I? And I'm sure there's another one as well for the silver panel variants. But yeah, there's lots of different variations. I did want to collect all of them and have a collection. That's partly Ollie's fault. So Ollie, if you're watching, I blame you. Apologies about the audio on this particular clip. The microphones are charging, and so I've just got to use the onboard mic from the camera. So I do apologise, but this is my own little project, the 100-watt black panel Bassman that I want to build. I'm doing it in a twin Reverb chassis, because that's the chassis that, I mean, was the same chassis, they just punched the holes differently. Unfortunately, some of these holes I don't need, and they're in the wrong place, which means we need to do a little bit of jiggery pokery and working out exactly where we want things to sit and be, etc, etc, etc. I'm keen to have all my filter caps, my filter stack, on the main board, or at least inside the chassis. I don't want to do the doghouse thing because I've got so much space, and without reverb and tremolo in this chassis, I've got real estate for days. So I want to move those on board. I'm still going to have my bias board separately up here, so I'm not going to have the bias components on the main board, but that's fine. That's not the problem. But what I've got to do now is, because ideally this is the board design I would use and stick with, and then I would mark my chassis holes exactly where I want them to be relative to the board. Can't do that because the holes are already punched, so I've got to do it the other way around, which means I need to work out roughly where things need to be in the chassis, so I can optimize everything the best I can. Do you remember on the 135 rebuild, the board was huge, but it had that massive area in the middle where nothing was used, which was a good thing because it separated the preamp from the power amp. And I think that's what I'm going to do in this particular build. Just bear with me. So the longest board material I've got uncut is this, right? So let me get that out of the way. I could make a board that's that long. I'd probably go up to there and cut it there. So I could have a huge board and have all my components roughly where I want them. So that would be rather ridiculous and hilarious. So I think that's probably what I'm going to do. So what I'm going to do then is chop this design up, and then I can place them roughly where I want them to be. Now, if let's say the far end of the board is here, I've got my 4 output valves here. Here's my phase inverter circuitry, the input side and the output side. This is the coupling side to the output valves. So ideally they need to be as far that way as possible. So it makes sense that either this novel hole or this one is my phase inverter, and I think this one is the one to use. All right. Sometimes you think of the phase inverter as the preamp, sometimes you think of it as part of the output stage. When it comes to the architecture of the amplifier, it's easier to think of it as part of the output stage, but when it comes to voicing the amplifier and the way it plays and performs, there's still a lot of EQing and tonal things you can do with the phase inverter, so often it's easier to think of it as part of the preamp. Your mileage may vary. So I think what we're going to do is, here's my phase inverter input. I think my first split is going to be there, like that. So that board can be roughly there. Now I've got a separation, right? Nice separation. And I can then optimize exactly where I want that to be. I think roughly around there would be nice. I think that's a nice place for it. Happy with that. So now my preamp side. So I've got 2 channels. One is the bass channel, one is the guitar channel. There's not a lot of componentry going on. And remember, the only changes I'm making from the 50 watt version is I'm adding a mid control to each channel. So I would like, here's the inputs for this channel, which will be this circuitry. And then here is my inputs for the second channel, and here, well, so here's the inputs for the second channel up here. So ideally I need to split these two as well, and I can't remember where, if this section here is part of the bass channel. I think it is. So I think our split is going to be there. I can always redo this. So this is going to go as far over this way as possible, because this is the one I want to be V1. That's definitely V1. This is definitely V4, which is my phase inverter. Yeah, you with me so far? And now I can decide, right, well, where do I want, so that, well, if that's going to be V1, that's going to be V2, the second valve in the bass channel. So now I need to decide whether I want V3, which is the preamp stages for the second channel, the guitar channel, to be this valve or this valve, right? Would be easier if I did that one. Look how close that is there. So maybe I didn't need to make that cut. Or I could do it this way. Use it here, but then I'm going to have to do quite long wire runs up to my tone stack up here. So actually, I think back here would be the best way to do it. What do you think? Now, I could either do it, actually, as two separate boards, or I could do it as the one long board with a large blank space there. I quite like that idea. One, because it's an homage to the original rebuild on the 135 we did. But also it'd be fun to do a massive board, I think. So what do you think? What would you do? I'm convinced... See, ideally, I think this one would want to be an inch this way. But never mind, maybe not. Maybe if we do it like that, we could then say V3 is there. Question mark. What do you think? Where are you? What do you think? Do you think that'll work? I think that'll work. I quite like the idea of that. So I can now have a board that's where's my tape measure? Sorry that it's upside down. So we could have a board that is 18.5 inches long. Is that right? Roughly 18.5. That might work. So yeah, it's about there, isn't it? I quite like the idea of that. I still want to keep short runs to my tone controls. Is there any reason why I couldn't use that as V1 and that as V2? Well, let's look at that then. Keep my inputs away from everything. It means a shorter run for these guys up there. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe this is V2 and that's V1 and that's nothing. It'd save me on some board material, wouldn't it? But then in that case, why don't I just do that? And then I haven't got a chopper board up at all. I like that. Actually, I think that's better. I do think that's better. V1, V2, yeah, okay, maybe. V3, that's easy enough, and V4 is easy enough, and then your output valves. What do you think? Do you think it's better like that, using those two? Or do you think it's better like that, using those two? Let me know in the comments down below. God, that's 9 minutes and 30 seconds of talking about board spacing. God. Ugh. Anyway, let me know. Right. W.S. Scott, again, regular commenter. Welcome back, mate. Says, Chris, glad you're here. You got your voice again. Yes, me too. Can't shut me up. So you mentioned in this repair that you were going to check the bias on the 12AX7 and the 6V6. This is the VHT Special 6. I saw the output bias, but didn't see the check on the bias for the preamp tube. Maybe you just didn't record it. No, I didn't. Sorry about that. I completely forgot. I did check it, I just didn't film it. But what I wanted to know is how you check the bias and adjust it. I know most times it seems that it's not needed and just not done. Thanks for these educational vlogs. Well, you're welcome, mate. When we're talking about biasing valves, or tubes, depending where in the world you're from, we're normally really only talking about the output valves of an amplifier. But every valve or tube in your amp is biased. Now, preamp valves, 99% of the time these days are cathode biased. So just like cathode biased output valves, the preamp valves are also cathode biased, which means there's a resistor separating the cathode to ground, and that's setting the operating point for that valve. And you check the bias exactly the same way as you would do for the output stage. Now, before we go any further, remember I said 99% of preamp valves these days are cathode biased. Some of them are grid leak biased, and on some very, very obscure hi-fi stuff, you can get fixed bias preamp valves. You and I probably won't ever come across it these days, because cathode biasing is just so simple and easy. But I have seen some hi-fi designs where the preamp valves are fixed bias. Very rare, but it has been known. Anyway, but you check the bias on them exactly the same way of your preamp valves as you would do a cathode biased output valve. You measure your anode to cathode voltage, you measure the voltage drop across the cathode resistor itself, and you use simple Ohm's law and Joule's law to work out the amount of current flowing through that particular triode, if it is a triode, right? Look at the data sheet to see what the maximums are, etc., etc. You'll notice most designs use a very similar setup, similar values. Usually it's a 100k anode resistor. Usually it's about a 1k5 cathode resistor for a single triode. If they're tied together, it'll be half that. You remember, half the resistance, double the current. So normally 820 ohms if it's two cathodes tied together. Because the standard operating point for a 12AX7 style or AT7 or a Y7 valve like that will be 1 milliamp of cathode current flowing through that valve. So it's all pretty standard, but it's often worth checking them just in case. Sometimes the designer, and I do this as well in certain amps, I will push that a particular way. I might decide to bias it extremely cold to get a very particular sound or feel. If you're after a style of asymmetrical clipping, you might bias it quite cold. If you're trying to achieve something very particular, especially in reverb circuits, you might decide, as I do in the Ainsley Lister signature here, to bias them quite hot to get a very particular result. So, but again, you check it, you measure it, and you go from there. But yeah, the process is exactly the same as biasing an output valve. It's just that the numbers end up being a lot smaller. Rather than being, 30 to 40 milliamps flowing through the valve, you've usually only got 1 milliamp. I'm waiting for some bits to arrive in the post, and our regular postie is normally here first thing in the morning, but he's on holiday this week, so he's got the replacement postie who always does our route reverse, so he always comes to us pretty much last, which really annoys me because I'm so impatient. I've got bits that I need coming so I can get some jobs done. Anyway, Catman Doodoo, who is now a channel member and a regular commenter, says, I've been in a house fire, albeit not caused by faulty device mains wiring, and I personally don't think you can highlight safety elements enough. This is in response to comments I've been making recently about the safety of guitar amplifiers, mains wiring especially. And it does feel, and I understand this, that I've been picking on a certain brand or highlighting a certain brand over others recently, but regular viewers of this channel will know I'm an equal opportunities offender when it comes to bad mains wiring. Any amplifier that comes through the door that has non-compliant, dangerous or simply or unsafe, whatever, mains wiring, I will always show that to you. I will always point it out. I don't care who the builder is, who the manufacturer is, how popular they are, what their fan base is like, what their client list is like. I don't care. If it's not compliant and it's dangerous, I will show you. That's my guarantee to you. Why do I show these things? Well, there's many reasons. One, because you guys need to know and deserve to know, so you can be educated on what is correct and what's not. If you're paying for somebody to build you an amplifier, you have a right, a legal right, for it to be manufactured to at least even the minimum safety standards. Ideally, it'd be a higher standard than that, but it needs to comply, and there's no argument on that. That's the law. The other thing is that we want to raise the game of everyone. So hopefully these guys who are building stuff that's not quite right will take a look at it and think, actually, yeah, fair enough, hold my hands up, I could do better. And then it raises everyone's game, and we end up with no issues, right? The rest of their circuits and builds can be as poorly designed, noisy, buzzy, whatever. At least it's not going to hurt somebody, right? And if they can't design the circuit, or they can't build neatly, you know, the soldering's crap or whatever, that all comes out anyway over time with, you know, stuff that's always coming in for repair. Those things get highlighted over time. But the main side wiring, completely unforgivable, in my opinion. Get it right or don't bother at all. So I've actually got a lot more stronger feelings on it than what I'm saying now, but we'll hold off on that just for the time being. Anyway, thanks for your comment, mate. Oh, actually, no, that's fair enough, because I haven't really responded to your comment. You said I've been in a house fire, or not be it caused by faulty device mains wiring. Me too. This is part of the reason I get really scared. Is obviously there are a couple of famous musicians who, through dodgy mains wiring in their guitar amplifiers, lost their lives. You know, the guy from the Yardbirds is one of them. Was it Mick Relf? I think so. But a couple of years back now, I live in what the Americans call a duplex. So it's a building, and it's two apartments, one on top of the other. We're in the top one. And the guy who lived downstairs from us, this is not to do with electrical main safety, but he left a chip pan on the stove and went outside to do some work on his car. That caught fire, completely burnt his flat, completely incinerated it. It was completely gone. Almost took ours with it. If it wasn't the fact that ours is a slightly older building and we've got a massive concrete plinth between ours, our flat would have gone up, our apartment would have gone up in flames too, and that would have been game over, right? And at the time, you know, my daughter was home alone, you know, my cat was home alone, well, the cat was home with her, I was here at work, and my partner was at work as well. So it could have been dead, it would have been deadly, very serious stuff. And once you've seen it, and I stood outside the front of that building, you know, the fire service were there trying to put this out, and you just see your whole life going up in smoke. And once you've seen that and experienced that firsthand, you never ever forget it. It's one of the worst feelings. So, and this is again partly why I'm so strict on it, is that, you know, I was lucky that my flat didn't go up in flames, but other people were less so. And all right, you know, the guy downstairs who left his chip pan on, you know, he just forgot. But when people are putting stuff out there that can cause fires, deliberately ignoring the law, again, that's an absolute no-no. So I don't care how many people come on here and moan and say, you know, I'm just jealous or whatever. Trust me, I'm not jealous of somebody who's putting people's lives at risk. Absolutely not, you know. I'm not jealous of that at all. I'm just embarrassed for them. Feels like I haven't had a twin reverb in for a very long time. It's funny, they come along like buses sometimes, and then you won't see one for ages. But this one is, as you can see, a silver panel, master volume twin reverb in surprisingly nice condition. Now, this has been brought into me by a customer who says this is 1974 Fender twin reverb, serial number A55604. Bit of background on the amplifier. I love this. I love when you get background. Bought in January 1978 as an ex-display item due to the damage to the Tolex along the front lower edge. The amp had been sat on the shop floor, but not on its caster, so people were stepping on it. Oh, right, okay. It hasn't gotten any worse. It's always looked like that. Otherwise, it's had a pretty easy life. I've used it for just a handful of gigs. Mostly it's been used for recording and home practice. It has been serviced a couple of times over the years, so you will see some replaced components on the inside. As to its age, the serial number of the chassis suggests a 1973. The Schumacher transformers are 72 and 73. The tailless Fender logo badge was used from 72 or 73, depending on what you read. And the speaker codes are from the second half of 74. So based on the latest hardware date, he thinks it's a 1974. Well, he's probably right, but we can verify that for him. So it's coming for a number of things. I'm going to read through what he's written on his notes. Apart from the effects noted below, everything works as it should. It's a fine amp, so it's really a case of treating the effects of aging, not the mileage. Okay, at 50 years old, the signs are there. Okay, fair enough. Lovely bit of TLC. There is an intermittent crackling and rustling. The master volume is a little scratchy at both around 3 on the dial and at 8 on the dial. Okay, and just returning that pot now, it does feel slightly notchy. It doesn't feel like a smooth turn on it. So we'll have a good look at that. The normal channel is a little microphonic with the pre and master volumes at 10. Tapping the front panel can be heard through the speakers. Pretty normal, but a good sign that either there's a microphonic capacitor inside or that the valve, V1 in this case, I believe, that's associated with the first two gain stages for this channel, that valve might be going microphonic, especially when you've got the volume up at 10. As long as it doesn't do it when you're playing notes through the amplifier and you don't get any ringing, then usually it's okay, but it might be a good idea to check the valve that's in there, maybe install one that's low microphony. There's an occasional low level hum. The last time it started about 20 to 30 minutes after switch on. Unplugging the guitar stops it, but plugging the guitar back in doesn't start it again. Okay, sounds like a common fault with poor grounding on the inside, so all of the grounding points that are used often need a good clean up and sort out. Rewire the old foot switch with a new cable and plugs if possible. So I've left that out the front. The customer did supply with the amplifier a box of goodies. Make sure there's no name on that. There you go. So we've got the original foot switch for the amplifier, and he'd like that rewired with new cable and plugs if possible. Sometimes not needed, but we will open that up and have a good look inside. Replace the reverb send and return RCA plugs. Okay, so he wanted me to replace the, spin the amplifier around, the connector cable from the tank up into the chassis itself. Often not required. I did write down on another piece of paper why he's requested that, but I can't remember off the top of my head what it is. So we will look at that. Okay, next page. Part baked. About 18 months ago, the amplifier was left switched on overnight with its padded cover fitted. I think it was like that for about 15 hours. The next morning, when I discovered that it was still switched on, and it was extremely hot. After allowing it to completely cool, it was tested and it seemed to be fine. No apparent harm done. I mention it in case you see or hear signs or symptoms that could be from overheating. Okay, so I shouldn't expect it to be a problem. I don't expect it to be a problem, but we will inspect it, we'll check things out, see where we are. Service. If the circuit board inside is in good shape, then great. Your usual full service, replacing all the aged and duff components, will probably do the job. If not, could the board be remade in FR4? If the board requires replacement and is no longer serviceable, then yes, we can do that. But we'll check. This should have the wax covered board, which often means that simply cleaning and removing the wax from the board itself removes most of the issues that these amps suffer with. The goal is long-term performance and reliability. Would you also check the transformers for overheating damage? Yes, of course. Mods. Swap the 6L6 GC power valves, and these have got Sylvanias in, very nice. For Jan Phillips 6L6 WGB short bottle valves, the ones he's provided in the box, and rebias. He said, I'd be interested to know, can both valve types run on the same bias setting? Correct me if I'm wrong, but this might be a bias balance circuit in this and not your standard adjustable bias, so we'll have to investigate that before I can answer it. He wants me to bypass the export voltage selector, but please leave it in place, and hardwire it for 240 volts. Absolutely no problem. The on-off switch has been replaced over the years with the incorrect type. See, this is a metal style toggle. The original had the black tipped version, which I do keep those on the shelf, so we can fit that for you. No problem. So quite easy, really. Got a nice little list of jobs, nice little run through, but shall we get this thing apart? Give it a good visual inspection, we'll have a look, we'll document everything, and then we will take it from there. Tim Baker, who I believe is a new commenter to the channel. So welcome, Tim. Thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoy everything you see and watch and enjoy and see and watch and enjoy and take in and all that kind of stuff. I'm repeating myself, but I'm just grateful that we're getting new people to the channel. He says, what value resistor do you use for discharging capacitors? I need to make a cable. Great question, Tim. Most of you have seen I have these discharge cables that I made up. I just take a simple test lead, cut it in two, and I solder a resistor in the middle, and then heat shrink it all up. And I've got a couple of these around the workshop, and what I do is you connect one end to chassis and the other end to your caps, and it just discharges the amplifier, makes it safe. You can calculate different values of resistors depending on how quickly you want the amplifier to discharge. The higher value the resistor that you use, the slower the discharge. But obviously the smaller the value, if you go too small, you can get it can discharge too quickly and you can get little sparks and things. So I use, in this particular cable, I've got a 100k resistor. I think it's a 2 watt. But I think I've got some others with 47Ks or 10Ks as well. So it's no particular value. As long as it's a high enough value, the amplifier is switched off. you can just connect it on. I always connect it on at the end of the B plus rail as well, so up by the preamp. So that means any charge is also discharged through all the other dropping resistors in the rail. Easiest way to make it safe. But yeah, that's what I kind of use. But if you go over 100k, you're never going to go wrong. It just works and it's great. So yeah, but test lead, crocodile clips on the end, drop it in half, resistor in series, protect it all up, and you're good to go. John Burns says, I see the Lazy J was shipped to you with the valves in situ. I always thought that was a bit of a no-no. Do you know what? It's one of those things where, you know, I ship a lot of amplifiers around the world. And I've always shipped them with the valves in the sockets, ready to go, assuming that the chassis is installed in the cabinet. And I can count on less than 2 fingers the amount of times that a valve has arrived smashed at the other end. So I firmly believe, through experience, that it's simply not the problem that people like to make out it is. Yes, there is a chance that it could happen, but in the same way that there's a chance that you could get run over by a bus when you cross the road, right? It's actually quite a small problem, and if you take the correct precautions, the chances of it happening are very, very small, and people worry about this stuff too much. Now, there are ways to increase the chances of things happening. Not packing your amplifier correctly, so not using enough protective material both inside and outside of the cabinet. So what I do is when I ship an amplifier, inside the back of the cabinet where the speaker sits and up by the valves, I pack it full of bubble wrap and you know, packing paper and all that kind of stuff. And I always, between the valve, if the valves are hanging down up against the back panel, I always put some bubble wrap in there as well, and just make sure that they're fully cushioned. And as I said, it almost never happens to get any damage. If I'm shipping, if I'm or you are shipping just a chassis on its own, not in a cabinet, then yes, I do recommend that you remove the valves, wrap those up separately, ideally then into a separate box as well. Fully protect your chassis, you know, ninja wrap it up, so you always work on the assumption that it will get dropped, and therefore you pack it accordingly, right? But no, I mean, I've been, this is now my 13th or 14th year building amplifiers full time, shipping them around the world, and if you pack these things correctly, it just doesn't happen. It really doesn't. You know, you get other damage. You really do get other damage sometimes. You know, I've had boxes fall off conveyor belts. I've had boxes left out in the rain. So, you know, the cardboard boxes disintegrated. I've had boxes go missing, so you don't know what's going on with them. But actual valves or tubes being damaged in transit, I just don't experience it, and I ship loads of amplifiers. So yeah, I mean, it's, as I said, I think it's one of those, yeah, it could happen, but actually if you do things right, it rarely does. So no, not really, John. Just pack things properly, and guess what? They're usually okay. Before I pull the chassis, let's just have a quick look at the condition of this. The front panel, apart from your standard scratches around the inputs, is in very nice condition. A couple of marks here and there, but nothing too unbelievable. Nothing too bad on this. It looks great. It really does. These washers are usually properly stuck on with dirt and grime, so I'm surprised that fell off. I think that should be on the outside. Maybe not. Anyway, we'll screw that back on. This should have the Velcro baffle. So the front baffle is It's not an actual baffle, is it? Because the speakers are mounted to the baffle, but this should be Velcroed on. So we should be able to pull this forward once I've got the chassis out, and we can inspect the front of the speakers and the cones. But apart from that, this overall, the condition of this amplifier is very nice. There is, I mean, the Tolex is in wonderful condition. The tilt back legs look great. Well, we'll spin this thing around. And again, so we're not, quite often with these speaker plugs, the plastic cap with the F on, they go missing over the years. So it's always good to see those. But this is just, do you remember that Pro Reverb we had in, was it a Pro Reverb? That was just mint. I mean, this is not far off that. Mains cable in the back. Lovely, looks to be in nice condition. Don't see any damage to it. Right, let's pull the back panel off. I think my drill's on the way out, by the way. It's starting to make some very interesting smells. Just has that slight electrical burning spell. I think the brushes are on the way out. Well, that wasn't a good fitment, was it? Okay. We've got a good view. We have got a good view. So we've got these Sylvanias. Which don't show any sign of overheating. I pull this one out. Well, that's lost its print, hasn't it? In fact, are they all? Yes, they are. They are all the same type. It's just lost its print. Okay. Pull you out the way, disconnect you, red on the right. A55604 on the serial number, that's the correct one. Right, strain relief. Very nice. I mean, this is in such lovely condition, hardly any dust bunnies inside. Right, okay. Can you see what I'm doing? You can. Okay, excuse me, sorry. You always forget how heavy 100-watt chassis are. Wow, that is clean. That is clean. That's really clean. Right, I'm just going to pull this out, one moment. Diama Riv, regular commenter, says, hey Chris, can you go into more detail about any drawbacks or gains to putting in the 5881s into a 6L6 amplifier? I was always wondering if that was possible to do. How did the amp end up still putting out 40 watts with the less powerful 5881s? Is it all due to the transformers? No, quite simply. If you look at the data sheets, so you look up the data sheets for a 6L6GC, which is the latest variant in the 6L6 family and the most common one used today, you can see in push-pull Class AB2, typical configuration, it can easily achieve 47 watts and even up to 55 watts in Class AB1. Okay, depending on the voltages you choose to run at, the load that you're applying to it from the output transformer, all that kind of stuff, right? So, and that's typically, a typical 6L6 amplifier will, happily do 40 to 50 watts, no problem at all. It's what they're designed to do. If you look up the data sheet for the 5881, now, the 5881s used to be, the confusion is the different variants of 6L6s, 6L6, 6L6G, 6L6GB, 6L6GC, and the 5881, which the older ones, or the modern 5881s might just be a 6L6 in a short bottle, or it might have, the older ones will have slightly different electrical characteristics. So I got myself turned around then. If you look at the data sheet for those ones we installed, the Tong Sols, and they were new old stock or old production valves, it says this 5881 is the electrical equivalent to type 6L6 and 6L6G, except that the plate and screen dissipation ratings have been increased approximately 20%. It embodies a complete mechanical redesign which results in greater resistance to shock and vibration, the blah, 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 blah. If we look at what those are capable of, in Class AB, AB2, they're easily capable of achieving 47 watts at just 2% total harmonic distortion. So they are still capable of producing the power that Tremolux requires. It's only a 40 watt amp, right? So people often confuse the maximum plate dissipation, measured in watts, with audio output, also measured in watts. And they're not necessarily the same thing, but I understand why some people get confused. So providing the socket configuration is correct and the circuit configuration too is also capable of running them, quite often you can plug them in and run them with a simple just a rebias, but you need to do your checks beforehand. But yeah, and that's why they're perfectly capable of producing the audio output for that amplifier, and they sound really good in that circuit as well. So that's all it is. All you've got to do is look at the data sheets, maybe draw some load lines, look at the grid curves, work out what's going on, understand, will it work? Is the amplifier configured to run them properly, or do I need to make changes? But if you go through all of that and you come to the conclusion that yes, you can, quite often in those Fender amps you can, you just plug, play, bias, and as I showed, off you go. Right, it's quite clean in here. It's definitely had some work done in the past, as expected. We have a combination of the later blue molded types and the brown turds. For the tone caps, we've got a lot of original carbon comp resistors in here. Some have been replaced. The 2525s that are on the board, the small electrolytics, look like they've been done with radial types. Not a big fan of that, so I would like to put some propers back in, if not just for if not for an electrical reason, just for to make it look proper. Same over on this board here, we've got some replacement caps and bits and pieces. Let's get you a better view over there, as you can see. So these have been done in the bias supply. Bit buzzy. Oh, that's fun. That'll need sorting. We've had some screen resistors replaced on V8 and 9. No, 6, 7, V8 and 10. Sorry, yeah, V8 and V10 have had the, but 7 and 9 have still got the original 470 ohms in place. But it's had some work done in the past. Some of the wax has got hot in some places. In other places, not so much. But that's kind of what we're working with. Your kind of standard, everyday, mid-70s Fender amplifier. I think it's just going to be general maintenance on this. Doesn't look too bad at all. Okay. Can we see anything? The pots have been changed? No, they all look original. That's a good sign. There are some questionable solder joints on these grounds. Make sure you can see what's going on. And there's a couple on the board here that look like they haven't been done particularly well. I can see that this one here, definitely cold, so that's going to need sorting. But overall, inside at least, not a bad example of a, what am I saying? Yeah, mid-70s Fender twin reverb. Very cool. Right, let's spin this thing over. And then we can have a look at these transformers. Okay, so the power transformer, 9th week of 73, the choke, 1st week of 73, output transformer, 41st week of 72, reverb transformer, 14th week of 73. So yeah, we are probably looking at a 74. Should we pull the doghouse off? Did he say it's had the electrolytics done? It probably would have done, right? Okay, place your bets now. What do we think? Original caps or replacement caps? Or a mix of both, I guess. And if they have been replaced, what have they been replaced with? So these 71s should have the silver Mallories in, if I remember correctly. Is that right? Is that right? Oh, the foam is stuck down. There you go, it's released. Are you ready? 3, 2, 1. Okay. There's the foam tape on the inside, by the way, for those that have not seen it. So we've got the 2 original Mallory brown tubes, the dynamite sticks, as some people like to call them, dated to '73. Sorry, it took me a while. Dated to 1973. That one's got a hell of a, sorry, hell of a bulge in it. You see it? Yeah. And its companion one is leaking. See? It's got a bulge and it's leaking, so that's definitely going to need to be done. Right, as regarding the other caps, yeah, we've got, this amp hasn't been on for a while, but let me just connect my discharge cable up just in case. We haven't got a particularly high quality cat there, but it will do the job. 47 microfarad, 500 volts. And then we've got two 33s in series. We're going to redo all of this. We'll do it properly. You know what I'm like about power supplies and B+ rails. Let's just get all of that done properly. Yeah. Not bad. Not the worst. I've seen them a lot worse than that, but it can be done better. It can be done better. Right. He said V1 gets microphonic, so should we have a look while we're here? ECC 83. Very nice. Right, okay. Right, the only thing I'll actually show you while I'm here. So for my 100-watt Bassman build, I found in my stash this reissue output transformer. It's one of the TAD branded ones. 129 A29, 125 A29AX, which, as you can see, is identical to this one. Right, it's the same stack, same looking unit. So that's what I'm going to use on my Bassman build. Do you remember I said I was going to use spare parts that I've had lying around? So that's what's going in that one. Anyway, but yeah, there you go. Proof in the pudding. So, what else have I got to say about this? Not much really. Not much really at all. Twin reverb. In for a nice service. Needs a bit of work. So nice upgrades. Of course, I'll show you as I go through and do it. But this is a nice, it feels like a nice little treat actually. I haven't had one in for a while. I do enjoy working on them. You can do some really cool stuff with this. I need to make a list of parts that we need to use on this. I will give this thing a play test and just confirm any of the issues, complaints, problems, and the things that he's brought it in for. Make sure we're all running good. But yeah, wow. Right, moving on. Well, that's it then, guys. Thank you very much for watching once again. As always, please give this video a thumbs up or your comments and questions down below. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you're feeling super generous like these guys have, why not join the channel? And I will catch you all at the next one. So I know some of you are wondering how racing at Silverstone at the weekend went. It went great and it went bad. So I had we've been chasing a problem with brake feel for a while. So on Saturday we spent quite a lot of time going through the whole braking system of the car. And we got a really nice pedal feel. You know, and the pedal hadn't felt that way in quite a long time. So really impressed. One thing that we found is the new brand of brake pad that I switched to on the front. They're great when they're new, but when they're a couple of races old, they're not as good as the old stuff. So I am going to switch back to the other brand. But you know, you learn stuff. The initial performance is just as good. It's just that they don't have that longevity, which is frustrating. I know, and they are much dust. They produce so much brake dust. It's unbelievable. But whereas before I'd easily get 6-7 races out of a set of front brake pads. You know, we got 3 races, and really after 2 races they started to feel like they were struggling. So anyway, we managed to get the brakes all sorted. It was all good. Went out in qualifying, as always with Silverstone, quite understeery. but we had an issue with the car where I lost all braking assistance from the brake booster. So they became essentially manual brakes. The pedal goes rock hard, and however hard you push that pedal, the car just doesn't slow down as much as it normally does, and it's very difficult to drive. So yeah, I had a brake failure in qualifying. I qualified at the back of the grid, but at least I did qualify for the race. So all I had to do then was do some overtaking. And that's what I did in the race. I started at the back, and I raced my way and to the front. I got into P1 just before the pit stops. Pit stop sequence came round. I stayed out longer than some of the other guys, which in hindsight was a bit of a bad thing because my tyres started to overheat, so you naturally go slower. But then on my pit entry, I was the car immediately in front of me, also in the pit entry, decided to drive really slow, about 5 miles an hour slower than you're allowed, and every second counts. So I lost some time in the pits. I came out in P2, just in front of P3, who had their second quicker driver in. And then I spent the rest of the race having the most amazing battle with the Vauxhall Nova for the rest of the race. Unfortunately, he did get me, and I couldn't quite get him back. So I did finish P3 in class, which means for me the championship is over. There are not enough points left at the final round for me to. Even if the leaders DNF or score poorly, the best I can do is finish 1 point behind. So I can't win the class championship, which is a little bit disappointing because that's I've been working so hard for it. But it is what it is. I am currently tied on points with P3, so we're both in second place or third place, whichever way you want to look at it. On dropped scores, however, because you always drop your worst round, I am 1 point ahead of them. So I am guaranteed second in the class championship, which is because they're not doing the final round. So yeah, that's a silver lining, right? That's not bad. I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed the 5 races so far. So what I thought I was going to do was, well, if my class championship is now wrapped up, and the best I can do is finish second, maybe I'll take the BMW to the final round and enter and run in a different class. But then we were doing some calculations, and we've worked out that there's not just the class championship, there is the overall championship as well. Now, it's an extremely difficult outside chance for this to happen, but if I win the final race and score a point for fastest lap, and 3 other drivers in other classes score poorly, I can still get third overall, so in the overall championship. So I'm still going to go and do that race. Of course I am, in the Mazda, and give it a go. Because you never know with motorsport. Things can happen all the time. Things change on just a whim, and you never know how it's going to happen. So that's the way it is. So vice champion-elect for the class championship, and possibly, it's going to be difficult. All the stars have got to align for this to happen, but I might be in with a chance of P3 overall. So that's how Silverstone went. I set a lap time faster than I'd ever driven around that layout. So, clearly things are going in the right direction. The top 3 in class, we were all on fastest lap within 1/10 of a second of each other again. So we're pushing each other so hard. But I got some really, really fun, hard racing at that race, and I enjoyed it, and it was good. But yeah, my championship is now, well, the quest to be champion is over. But never mind, it is what it is. So next time out, both cars, the Mazda and the BMW, we're going to be racing at Donington Park. I'm going there for some extra track time. The BMW's having its race debut in the hands of Nick, so we're going to run as a 2-car team. I think I've told you guys already, but it is what it is. But if you go over to the 2RM channel, you will find the full race on board from my car. Either it should be up by the time this video comes out. So yeah, search for 2RM, 2 Romeo Mike Motorsport on YouTube, and you'll find my racing channel.